procurement in New York City, and I ask the big question every day is, how are we doing with women and people of color? I look at systemic racism, I look at the operations of government, and I hold the city accountable for making sure that they do business with us. My word and my recommendation will be, gotta follow your passion. Whatever makes you mad, do that, and create some discipline around it.
Awesome. Give Wendy a round of applause! Dr.
I'm Dr. Mika Neplik. I am Chief Medical Officer at a hospital in Hoboken, New Jersey. I am an emergency medicine physician. I practiced medicine for 15 years and then switched over to be an administrator. So I am second in charge of my hospital. I am in charge of every single doctor in the whole entire hospital, as well as a bunch of other people that help run things that are not physicians. So I have about 50 or so non-physicians who are what we call my direct reports. And the one thing similar to follow your passion, but it's don't fear change. Change is sometimes scary, change is hard. Don't fear change if it'll get you where you want to go.
Give it for Dr. Mika!
Hi, I'm Maria Arias. I am the Global Associate Director at WebMD. I work on the professional side, which is an online resource called Medscape for physicians. We help them continue their education for free and keep them up to date with the news. I oversee 250 plus countries, not including the US, so I oversee all of the global activities on the emerging markets particularly. One of my advice is be innovative and inquisitive. Marketing is always changing, health is always changing, so always be on top of the trends, continue to learn.
Yes, you love it up!
My name is Christina, and first of all, I'm impressed by all these wonderful ladies. So I'm like, wow, just like you might be taking all these notes. I'm like, I should have bought a notebook. But that's because I'm an educator and I'm a learner all the time, right? So I've been a teacher, I've been a trainer of teachers, I've been an administrator at schools, and I'm currently pursuing my doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania in education. But more importantly, I'm also the founder and leader of my own company where I support schools that are failing, that really need support. I also support families that are looking for better opportunities for their children. And I also support nonprofits that are really thinking about what to do with education and how to support the school, because we know that everything just doesn't happen in schools. And I think that the thing that I would love for you to always remember is that there's a lot of things out there to do, to think about, to consider, to try to fit into, but don't stop creating. There's also a lot of space for creation, and there's a lot of things out there that we don't fit into. Don't try to fit it. Create.
Christina, give it up, give it up!
I love that. Don't fit in, create. I love that. My name is Gabrielle Simpson-Gambrell. I have too many jobs, I'm working on it. So my regular job is I'm the head of marketing and communications at Barnard College at Columbia University. So Barnard is Columbia University's undergraduate women's college, and I am the first Black woman and the youngest to ever be in my role. The jobs I have is I teach graduate marketing and communication courses at Columbia and at NYC. And I started teaching here at St. John. So when I was 22 years old, I haven't been here in a long time, but when I was 22 years old, I was walking into classrooms on this campus as a professor, and a lot of times people thought I was the student, and they would speak to me as such. And so I say that to say, don't ever let your age, don't ever let your background deter you from doing whatever it is that you want to do. You are worthy, you are more than worthy, you are qualified.
We give them a round of applause. And I'm about to flip the script, but I think it's so relevant for this panel because there's so much global, there's so much diversity, there's so much international. And so the question that I want to ask, we've talked about what leadership skills, but I want to take it a step farther from an international perspective and dealing with different cultures and dealing with different people from different backgrounds. background, what do you believe are the key leadership skill sets that students need to develop now that will prepare them not just for a workforce, but for a global workforce? And feel free to chime in however you feel inspired to share.
Compassion. I think that's my number one thing, one skill set that I had to continue to work on as I continue to work on global. I started with my Latin America background. My family's from Colombia, and I was born and raised in New York, but I was also raised in Colombia. So I learned very quickly about my South American roots. I learned how they spoke. I learned how they thought about business. So when I started to work in global, meaning France and Italy, I started to be more inquisitive, which I said before. How do they work? And I worked for a French company for a while at L'Oreal, and let me tell you, you learn very quickly personalities, you learn very quickly how to deal, and then eventually that just helped me continue to catapult into different countries. But again, I go back into compassion and understand cultures, because culturally, we are very similar in some aspect, and we can connect. So connect with your people, connect with your peers, connect with your colleagues. That's going to help you further your career.
I would say look for opportunities to learn. Look for opportunities when you are the only, so that you're surrounded by people who are not like you, who have different experiences, who you can learn from, and use that as an opportunity to learn a new culture. Don't take for granted that you can learn from your peers, you can learn from your classmates about their background, and you may think, oh, they're from the same place I'm from. Their heritage will teach you a lot. So look for opportunities where perhaps you're the only.
I think that, so as I said, I'm a doctor, so one thing I really had to learn was not just about culture, but how they want to be interacted with. There are some people who don't want to be touched. There are some cultural and religious reasons that you can't shake their hand. There has to be another person in the room present, that they want to be called by their first name, or they want to be called Mr. or Mrs. or whatever it is. There are sometimes I walk in a room and they will not even believe that I am the doctor. So, but nevertheless, I know my emotional intelligence, I know who I am, I'm good with that, and I have to respect where you're coming from, no matter what it is, and sometimes I have to help you be where you are. So now that I'm the boss, and I'm the boss of some people who are extremely different, they might be Eastern European, I have Hasidic Jews, they're very, very different than me, but I completely respect their culture and know how to speak to them on that level. You have to respect their views, you have to understand their views, religious, cultural, otherwise, or else you will never be able to relate to them. And if I can't understand, there was someone who is not a Hasidic Jew, but she's extremely religious, and she needed to have every Saturday off. And at that time, I was her boss, and someone else said, that's unfair, that's not okay. I said, no, I understand that. She needs to have Saturday off, she needs to respect the Sabbath. She's going to work all the other days just to have that day off. And I was able to give her that flexibility as a boss because I understood and respected her culture. So I think understanding the differences and appreciating the differences and knowing how to work together.
I think the most important thing is to be really proud of who you are. I think you live in a world, I think you're growing up in a space where you may be like a second generation or third generation born here in your families. And so you don't have what maybe some of us had, where we had this rich culture from our parents that very crazy sometimes, but very rich, right? And even though we face the world every day, can you hear me? We face the world every day that sort of rejected who we were and told us that we weren't enough. We would always be able to go home and like be and belong, right? And feel safe and feel good there. And you may or may not have that. If you do, cherish it, celebrate it, find a way to love your crazy mom today, or your grandma, or whoever that is, because it really tells you a lot about who you are and the richness of you. And if you don't have that, I want you to learn something that took me forever to learn, because I thought that I was doing something wrong here in America because I couldn't really figure it out, was that 70% of the world functions under the more about making it together than we do as an individual. And only 30% of the world functions in that individualistic mentality, right? Where I only, it's important for me to strive and to work hard. And neither of them are wrong, and neither of them are better. And so depending on which one of those you belong to, just celebrate it, own it, respect it, value it, and then advocate for yourself. Then go to the hospital and say, you know what, actually in our culture you can't really talk to us like that because, and it would be easier if, and hi, hiring officer, by the way, right? I actually can't really sit here and brag about myself because that's not culturally correct. However, if you ask me questions, I can do that, right? And that's different. And that's when you know yourself and you value yourself and who you are because your humility is important. So I think it's really important for you to celebrate yourselves and to learn who you are because that takes you really far and you can't learn about anybody else if you don't know yourself.
That was beautiful. Can everybody give a round of applause for Christina? Full disclosure, we know each other. I completely agree. I guess I just wanted to share a little story with you. I'm 36, Dominican, and I just started, like that. I just started really traveling. I just got an opportunity to do that, and I went to Israel last year, and I met a family who was marginalized in Israel, and everyone raised their hands. What is it like being marginalized in Israel? And the family looked at us and they said, what is it like being Latino in the United States? We're like, oh, okay, we get it. So it's just to say that it doesn't matter where anyone is from. We all share so many common stories. We share so many experiences that are similar that they may manifest in a different way. And if you keep that in mind as you are doing your work, as you're growing, as you're becoming leaders, it'll really get you to the core of what it means to be human. So my advice would be, if you can get a chance to travel, when I say travel, hey, Chinatown is like right in New York City. Little Italy is in New York City. There's so many spaces in New York that you can experience other cultures without actually having to leave New York. It's important that you expose yourself because that's what's going to get you into that space of compassion. And when it's like what Christina said, when you know yourself, it's going to be much easier to know everyone else. But make sure you expose yourself in the process.
I want to move to another question. Based on your experiences working with new professionals or maybe interns, who is that one person that stood out to you and why? Oh, based on your work with young professionals and with interns, who is that one person that stuck out to you when they volunteered or they just began, and why was it that they stuck out to you?
So my undergraduate degree is in television, video, and film. So I wanted to initially be on air, then I wanted to be a TV producer, and I did go that route, and I worked as a TV producer. Thank you. And so in television production, it's a pretty casual field. You wear jeans and a t-shirt, that's absolutely acceptable. I wore suits every day. I was suited and booted, walking around a TV studio in heels. And everybody said, every day that I was at my internship, Gabrielle, you look so nice. Every time I see you, I look forward to seeing what you have on. I was the first one in and the last one to leave. And I was offered a job after my internship. So I graduated college early, so at 20 years old, I was working at ABC. Was it perhaps because I was the smartest person in the room? No. Was it because I stood out? Yes. So I say that to say, whatever it is that is you, that you can stand out, one easy way to stand out is to be the first one there and the last one to leave. I have really, really smart employees who work for me. I have really awesome interns that work for me. However, the person that runs out at 5 or 6 o'clock, I give them the side eye. I do. I really do. So be the first one in, the last one to leave. Even if you don't even have anything, you're just waiting and you leave 1 minute later, be the last one to leave.
To add on to what Gabrielle said, I agree with you 100%. Stand out completely. I work, WebMD is a publishing house, but we're also a technology firm. we wear jeans, we dress down, no one dresses up. I had this one intern who was amazing, and I hired her actually, and she would come in before me, interestingly enough. She was there at 8 a.m., and she would leave maybe right before me. And the one thing that really stood out from her outside of, dressing and everything is she innovated. I asked her one thing on her first day was, if you can tell me what process can be enhanced or what we can do better to do our business better, I will hire you on the spot. And before she left, she came up with a process that I had been trying to figure out, but unfortunately through the timing, I couldn't. She came up with that process, and I said, own it. Own that process, and this is how you're going to get hired, and this is what you're going to be doing going forward. So, be innovative. Challenge the status quo. Ask questions. Ask why do you do things the way we do. Because sometimes we do things not realizing that it's just how things are done. We're not questioning it every day because business happens. You have to move forward. So when you stop for 2 seconds and ask us questions, we'll actually have to stop, think, and be like, well, I don't know. Or maybe have an answer for you. It's one or the other. But ask questions and be innovative.
I said earlier, I'm working in government. I've done work around politics as well. And so when you're in government politics, there are many experiences with interns because interns are sort of the livelihood, whether it's a campaign or a government office, and you get exposed to all the different talents. And I would say when we would do campaign work, at the end, you either win or lose the campaign. There are only the 2 or 3 positions. So ones you keep are normally the ones, not so much that have worked the longest, but it's who had the most drive. I think I'll tell you a story about one intern last year who came in, from 5 to like 7 a.m., he drove an Uber. He came into my office at 9, and between 9 and probably 3 o'clock, the internship ended around 3, all he did was think about how to be more efficient. He couldn't stay longer, he couldn't stay past 5 because he had to go back to drive the Uber. But when he was there, he was so efficient, he was so innovative. He made sure that not only did he provide a new content, but he also made my day easier. And I think that's so critical when you have someone on your team, intern or not, that thinks about how do I add to the team. So I think as you're developing your talents, think about what is your unique talent that you can bring to your team to not just make your team's life easier, your manager's life easier, but how can you make things more effective, more efficient? At the end of the day, you have to have the drive. I have had interns who are wonderful with 0 drive. And I just want to make it clear that there's a stark difference between that. They come in and they're like, thank you, can you please sign my recommendation? And I am not compelled to hire them, and it's mostly because they lack that core passion for the actual work.
I have slightly the opposite answer, because I cannot think of one new person or intern that I loved. Not one is sitting in my head. But I can think of ones that, oh, Lord help me. No, thank you. Oh my God. So I'm going to say what not to do, because that's the only thing that's in my head. One, couldn't stand when the women would flirt with men, thinking that that's going to get them on the good side. Or if none of the intern males ever flirted with me, I think I should be offended by that, but I'm okay. But for women, don't do that. For women, you do not need to show your cleavage at work. You do not need to wear skirts super short, 2 inches above the knee, even though it seems a little conservative. It's about the highest you got. When you cross your legs, make sure you don't have all your stuff showing. For men, and these are people that would work with me, for men, just be clean. I don't like sneakers at work, that's true. Oh, sorry. I wear heels all 5 days of the week, so on the weekends I was with my dogs and walking. I apologize. But for men, and be clean. That's it. You do not have to look very nice. You do not have to wear a suit and tie. And even if it's, you know, just saying that she was wearing beautiful suits every day, everyone was wearing jeans and t-shirts. It doesn't bother me if you're wearing what everybody else is wearing. Just be clean. Just be neat. Number 2, don't try to prove that you're smarter than me. There's no reason. I've been doing this for a really long time, and I know that I'm smart. There's no reason to ask the questions, but ask questions so that you stump me, so that you look good. That's not going to work. I don't like it. Okay, last but not least, do not lie. Do not say you have a skill that you don't have. And in medicine, oh, I had this one intern who said they did a certain test to my face. I said, did you do such and such? They said yes. And in my job, I have to believe you if you say something. Went back and found out they didn't. They did not like my wrath. Because this is healthcare. This is life or death. You told me this person wasn't bleeding, and you did not actually do the test. You lied. Now, whether they just wanted to impress me and said they did it, or whether they didn't want to do it, it's not a pleasant test. Maybe they didn't want to do it. Maybe they didn't want to do it. I don't know. But that was not okay. And they weren't in my rotation. So don't lie. Huge.
I'm going to give you my teacher answer, which you're not going to like, but I hope you do. Read. Good Lord. Good. Oh, read. You can read about one thing. You can read about whatever you want. I don't care what it is. Just read about that thing till there's nothing else to read about it. You know why? Because you can't ask questions if you don't really know. You can't fully know your passion if you don't really talk about it. So you gotta you gotta find something you like to read about and you read it until there's nothing else to read. Because it's gonna make you smarter. It's gonna allow you to create and innovate and think. Because what I know for sure that professionals rarely do, the higher up they go, the less they read. They just don't have time. They make 100,000 decisions every second of their lives, and some of them are life or death, and some of them are not reading, or not reading past what, and she reads what she writes, right? Because she writes the short version of it, right?
Yes.
Right? And so everyone's trying to figure out how not to read. So read the long version. There's Audible. There's a million different things that you guys probably know better than I do about how to get the reading done. It can read to you. You can shower and read. I mean, there's so many things I've just learned about now. But read, and then read some more. I mean, there's so much value in that.
I want to follow up on that about doing your research. So reading is important. So the bulk of my career is in media and entertainment. And so it is imperative that you know what's going on in your respective industry. I went on an interview with the Chief Communications Officer at CBS. It was an informational interview. Do you guys know what informational interviews are? Yeah. Somebody stand up, tell me what an informational interview is. I'm in teacher mode. Informational interview. What is an informational interview?
Informational interview is when you have an interview with a professional to get to know them, their roles, their day-to-day activities, their specialization.
Perfect. An informational interview is when you're not interviewing for a job. You're interviewing to learn more about a person. Remember, everyone likes talking about themselves. Everyone likes talking about themselves. You give someone an opportunity to talk about themselves, talk about their career trajectory, and hopefully you have interest in that career and you've done a little bit of research on them. Everyone likes to know that you've done research on them, but don't seem like a stalker. So, I went on an informational interview with the Chief Communications Officer at CBS Television Network. At the time, there were no entry-level roles. The most junior person on the team was a director. Typically, a director in my industry has about 10, 15 years. And so this was days after Michael Jackson died. So I come in the interview with the Chief Communications Officer at CBS. I have my portfolio, I have writing samples, press releases that I've written, articles I've written for different publications, so on and so forth. It's going in and out. So I'm ready to go over my resume, I'm ready to explain my resume, I'm ready to talk about why he should essentially create a job for me because there's no entry-level post there. And he says, what do you think about Michael Jackson? And I said, it's really unfortunate. I can't believe Michael Jackson did. He said, Michael Jackson was murdered. I said, I don't think Conrad Murray murdered him. At that time, Conrad Murray, had not been arrested for the death of Michael Jackson. I say that to say, I work in an industry like entertainment, pop culture is important. He wanted to know that I could have a conversation and what I thought about Michael Jackson. What does Michael Jackson have to do with the job? Nothing. However, this is entertainment that I was interviewing for. And so then we talked for about an hour about music, about pop culture. End of the conversation, he said, I'm going to create a job for you. I like you. And he did end up creating a job for me. If he started the conversation saying, what do you think about Michael Jackson? I was like, I don't know. He would have been like, okay, have a good day. So know your industry. Be prepared for whatever the norm is in your respective industry. Me coming from media and entertainment, if I'm on a sports interview, my keeps going out. If I'm doing something with sports, I need to know what's happening in sports right now, guys. I work in sports as well. What's happening in sports? College sports. March Madness. So if I'm going into something in sports, I need to be prepared to be ready to talk about March Madness because that's what's hot right now. So whatever your respective industry is, you need to read, you need to be knowledgeable. There's pretty much a podcast for everything. Find an applicable podcast. Find every industry, every single industry has different publications, kind of newsletters, if you will, that speak to what's hot and what's relevant in that industry, and that's really important for whatever industry you want to go into.
Josh, I'm sorry, you're gonna kill me.
No.
But I just wanted to add one thing that I don't think any of us said that I think is also really a huge quality, and it's collaboration. No one in this world works by themselves. No one. And no one likes to work with someone who can't work with other people. It is the most painful experience. You've all had group projects. You all had that girl, that guy, right? So remember that person and do your best to bring your collaborative spirit to the professional workspace. I mean, that is essential. And sometimes that means that someone might look better in front of the boss. You might have to share the spotlight. But trust me, you can talk about yourself all day, but it's so much nicer when other people talk about you. And if you are helping other people or supporting other people, that's a lot of people talking about you. And getting into the ears of other higher ups. So that's also really important. I think we said a lot about you as individuals, but I think we forget to remember that like no one likes to work with people who don't know how to work with others.
Awesome. I want to move to this next question. Really specifically to your industry, what are some new things on the horizon that new professionals should be aware of? I know in certain places they talk about artificial intelligence and the importance of robots taking jobs. But in your industry specifically, what are some new things that you see that maybe they can be prepared for that can help them to find that opportunity, such as, I remember when I was in school, 1997, 2001, and we had pagers, we didn't have cell phones, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, social media manager wasn't even known. But now it's a reality right now it's a job, now it's a career, now people are doing really well in that space. In your area of expertise, is there anything that you see that they may not have heard about that they should be aware of in the future?
Just one question. How many of you want to go into being a healthcare professional? Okay, so I went to med school, and I did my residency. Then 6 months after I completed my residency, I went and got my master's. So I have a master's in management with concentration in healthcare, and I got it at NYU. Thank you. Went to med school at Howard. I didn't realize how important having an advanced degree after being a doctor was, and that's super important right now. There really aren't a lot of solo practitioners anymore. You're with practices, you work in business. So having, whether it's a master's in business administration, a master's in management, a master's in healthcare, any of that is, you need a degree, after being a doctor. And some people actually get JDs also.
on top of being a doctor. So whether it's, like Josh said, artificial intelligence, it's understanding the technology of that, whether it's the field that I'm in, administration, whether it's working with healthcare companies and insurance companies and understanding different things. You could work in politics, but you still need to be the healthcare advisor. There's just way too many things. You don't have to just be, it sounds terrible to say the word just, let's say, you don't have, I'm gonna leave it in, anyways, just a doctor, or just a nurse, or just a nurse practitioner, or just a physician assistant. You can have that knowledge base with the practical medicine and then use it in other fields, because that's what more and more people are doing now.
I wear multiple hats at my job. I've been working for a healthcare industry. That's technology and publishing. So you see, it's giving you 4 industries right there. And on top of that, I have to be on top of the news, political, and healthcare for every country that I deal with. So it's to the point that Gabrielle and that Christina were saying before, read. Read the news and continue to stay on top of trends. Social listening is something that I think you're all doing kind of subconsciously anyways. You're looking at hashtags, you're going through Twitter, you're going through Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media outlet you are following. Follow those hashtags to see what the new trend is. There's always a new trend. When I was in college finishing up my degree, there was a minor called Ethics and Social Responsibility in New Media. This was right when Facebook had just launched. So that meant we were already thinking about how we were going to deal with social media going forward. And we're talking about like over 10 years ago. So AI is going to continue to grow, and that's the one thing I'm sure you've heard on other panels. AI is where the businesses are kind of trending to, but social listening is something that I think is being underused and not being followed as much as it should be. And that's something that you have to your advantage. You're on your phones mostly every day, every few hours, and look at the trends and see what you can talk about when you do go to these interviews, because they're going to be listening to you. To what Christina was saying, the higher up you go, the less you read. So even though the higher ups are the ones making the decision on like what AI technology should we be doing, they're not reading all the content to it. But when you come in and you give them that information, they're very appreciative and start thinking about it in a different way. That is your power, that is your leverage. Use it.
Can we talk about social media for a second, please? You kind of went in that direction. There are individuals coming into the workforce right now with degrees in social media that want to do social media. Under my purview is marketing, some of which I have social media coordinators, I have social media managers. I have students who have me to look at their resume, and I have mentees who I look at their resume and their socials listed on their resume. If your socials listed on your resume, make sure your socials up to par. You're voluntarily giving this information, make sure your socials up to par. I've not hired a handful of people because of their social. Now, let's say different industries, they may not think twice, they may not look at your social, but if you want to go into entertainment, you want to go into sports, you want to go into marketing, you want to do a social media top job, they may even find your social media. And so what I encourage people to do, if you want to do whatever it is, have that page be blocked, okay? Have it be private, but then have something that is a proper reflection that you will want an employer to see. I've had people apply for jobs with me. They list their social media on their resume, their pages are blocked. In front of me, I say, pull out your phone, I just sent you a request. You're applying for a social media job. You're applying for a social media job. You list your social media on your resume. You're in an interview with me. I want to see that you know how to do social media. So I'm going to look at your social media. Oh, you can take your phone out. Please accept my request. I've had people say, oh, no, sorry, it's private. Why are you listening on your job? Or if you want to do social media, you need to have public-facing pages. I'm not looking for the amount of followers. I'm looking that you understand how to use the platforms that you will use on the job.
I know for those of you who are, I'm not sure how many of you are interested in politics, but there's a pretty clear there's a good formula for politics, and it's almost threefold. I think one, you need to get involved in your community. That's number one, and most of you should have community boards that are represented in your area that you can actually sit on now as students. If you are not the president of the student organization, it's okay. There are many other ways to get involved. The concept is, if you want to get into politics, then you have to learn what it takes to run a coalition of people, a coalition of stakeholders. That's something that you actually aren't taught in school. You can't go to school and learn how to relate to a coalition of advocates. You can only learn that on the ground. So I would say if you aren't involved in an organization now, you should. When I was at the University of Delaware, I was the outreach coordinator for the Hispanic organization, and then I became the recruitment head, then I started the Youth Empowerment Task Force, and then I became the president of the organization. And I think I always joke around that what I did for free 15 years ago, a long time ago, more than 15 years ago, now I get paid for it. And I don't know that I learned that in school. That wasn't something I took a class on. That was a skill set that was developed on hand, and it's come in handy for me. So if you are interested in politics, I would say learn what it is to run an organization. I would also say get involved in a local campaign. Most of you, if you, whatever part of New York you live in, there's usually district leader races or county seats. There's always an opportunity to get involved in campaigning inside of your local community. And trust me, elected officials are always looking for volunteers. It's never a shortage of need. So I would say to do that, and then get an expertise. I ended up doing community outreach. I worked for the borough president of Manhattan, then I went to go work for the mayor, and then after that I went to work for the controller. So I've been able to see government kind of through a 360 lens, where you get to see it from the external point of view and then inside of administration. And they all have the same thing in common, is really understanding what expertise areas exist in those industries. So if you want to be a doctor, that's great, and you can be a doctor and get involved in politics and maybe one day run a hospital. That doesn't just happen. You have to be involved within stakeholders, right? You don't just pop up. There's politics there. If you want to be a lawyer, I don't know if you saw, but New York City just elected the first Attorney General, an African American woman. That was huge. That doesn't just happen. I mean, she became a lawyer first and then got involved and was involved in her community. And that's the story for most people in government, and that first you're fueled by a passion of community and giving back and building coalition. Our favorite story is the Obama story, right? He started off as a tenant organizer. If you listen, I don't know how many of you read Michelle's Becoming. If you haven't, you should. That should be the first thing on your audiobook. Or if you read Sonia Sotomayor's story, they have the same core formula. I got involved in my community. I got involved in a campaign. I already knew I wanted to do a specific industry, and from there, the career started to spiral. The first thing you can do is get involved in your school and see if you can be helpful at a local organization.
I think for education, education's everywhere. So even if you don't think that you're involved in education, you are. So just be very responsible with your words, because it's really, really important, because it really matters to the little kids in the classroom, and it really all trickles down there. So if you are interested in being a teacher, we can talk later, that's fine. But education as an industry is humongous. I think you guys think about teachers, and traditionally you think about schools and high schools and colleges, and that's it, that's the gamut. And education is usually every city's biggest budget consumer. It's definitely New York City's money gobbler. It's the nation's money gobbler, right? And there's so many components to it, right? So you could, and we need you to, be really, really interested in making the world better, and there's no better place to make it than in education. And you can do it at the policy level, and you can do it in the practical level in the classroom. But one thing I want all of us to remember is that education is not linear. So it's no longer the teacher that became a teacher right out of college, and then she was a teacher for 25 years, she retired, and that was great, and she taught all the kids in the community. That's not real anymore. That doesn't really happen. And I have a theory that in 10 years, a lot more change is going to happen with education as a whole. Because it's just not sustainable the way we run this model of like 9 months and then you have your summers off. Like none of that even makes sense anymore for the world that we live in right now. And so there's a lot of changes coming. I think that your job is to really make sure that you understand where you want to make the change, where you want to make an impact, where do you see yourself, and if education is a place that you can attach it to, then really think about all the things you can do. I also fundamentally will always plug you to be teachers because it is the most humbling experience of your existence. I mean, if you can sit there and hang out with 25 kids that other people raised and come out alive, there is not one thing in the planet that you cannot overcome. And then the final thing about education is just, I agree with most of the things that were said here. You need to get more graduate degrees. You can't just stop at your bachelor's. And I love this whole idea that you can be an influencer, and I don't know those people, and they like make tons of money and travel the world and live this wonderful life. But the truth is that that's not really the truth for everybody. And so the more degrees you have, the more valuable you are to the world. So just remember that when you're tired of going to school. It's really important.
You give a round of applause. Real quick, are there any questions? We have 5 up front, real quick. We've got 5 minutes. We do a speed round. Let's go. You're up.
Shadowing is easy. Go to the local hospital and just tell them you want to shadow. I get requests all the time. That's it. Try an urgent care center. Because there are physician assistants at urgent care centers or nurse practitioners, so at least you see the mid-level provider, which is what you need to understand that level of it too. But local urgent care center would probably be able to do that just fine.
Next question, yes.
So ageism is real. I experience it all the time, being in higher ed, being at an Ivy. A lot of the rooms I'm in, most people are older than my parents. And so I experienced, someone said to me, very well-respected person, said to me, I have clothes older than you. Now, I am very senior, I'm an officer of the college, and I told her, you should go shopping. And I smiled. But I'm at a place that I can do that. And so I had to smile and work my butt off and let everyone know that, dang, she's young, she's 20 years old, she's 21, she's 22, but she's so good. I'm just gonna joke around, but I still want her in the room because she's so good. So despite adversity, despite things not being fair, when you are a person of color, when you are a woman, when you are young, when you are old, we all have various things that kind of hold us back, but we can't let that hold us back, right? So on the surface it may look like, oh, it's so hard. It is hard. And you have to push through it anyways and make your work so good that they want you in the room anyway.
And be humble enough to learn. I know this is my question, but be humble enough to learn. They actually have something they can share with you, and they can help you learn. So like figure out how to like get them to bring you into the fold without feeling all offended.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's something that every single person has something that's uniquely you. And so I say my parents appropriately named me Gabrielle. I got to get the Gab. I can talk you out of a situation. I can talk you in a situation. So whatever it is your niche is, there's something that you bring to the table. There's something that when you're in the room, better than anyone else. And I'm always able to quickly survey the room and say, okay, this is where my niche is, or this is where I feel like I can fill in the gap. And everyone here, all of you can fill in that gap. So you need to develop and tap into what it is that you contribute to that situation, that table, that group, that classroom, whatever the place is.
So one more question, we're gonna grab it. Yes.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm actually a freshman here at St. John's University, and I'm an international business major. And really the only thing that sets my major apart from anyone, another business major, is that I take a language. So with that being said, what do you think is the first stepping stone, say once I graduate, what would be the first stepping stone for me to actually see my goal and see my dream in international business rather than just starting locally?
Does St. John's have a study abroad program?
Yes, I'm actually going on one later this month.
So that's it. That is your first step. That is literally your first step before you even graduate, is study abroad. Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to, but again, I said before, my parents are from Colombia, so I would go down there and I got to explore different countries as well. So I got that experience from just traveling with my family. However, you have this great experience to study abroad, learn, and if it's in Europe, travel to different countries because it's right there and it's super cheap. And just continue to literally learn, go down the Christina way. Education is key.
And to your point, optimal, there's clubs on campus, I know because I taught here for 5 years. Every international club, rather it be the Italian club, the Latino club, every single club, be a part of that. Don't overwhelm yourself, but if there's an opportunity for you to be an officer, to be a president, to be a vice president, that will help. Know who you're competing against. You're competing against international studies students who have 5, 6 internships. Make sure your resume is up to par. So all of you have several opportunities at your colleges to build your resume, to tremendously build your resume, but then make sure you are strategic on the internship that you get, that is an international business. So by the time you graduate, you have international business internships, you have club on-campus organizations that speak to that, you have several things on your resume that speak in particular to international business.
Intern in the country as well if you can.
I'll give you one more, yeah.
Hi, my name is President Chanel, and I go to North Carolina State University. My question is to you. I actually am a technical theater major at Central, and I've been struggling kind of trying to find an internship. So, like, what's the skill for me?
Tell me your dream job, technical theater. You want to do something on Broadway? Tell me, what's your dream?
Actually, we do set design or something. I'm more so trying to see right now in the state design.
Okay. Can you get to LA or New York for an internship? Can you, in the summer, that will help you tremendously if you get in the market where there's a ton of set design internship, there's a ton of theater opportunities. You need a mentor in the industry. Let's connect afterwards, okay?
Can we give our panel a big round of applause? Let's go here. One word. There's so much stuff going through my head. I wanted to end with love. I just always love this concept of love. So what is one word that you would say describes a leader that leads with love? Sorry about that, but I just felt it in my heart.
I would say honesty.
Understanding.
Keep going, yeah. You said multiple.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's right.
I'm just gonna put a couple things quickly together, don't kill me. Something that I didn't say earlier, which I'm sure all these women are also, when you get to a certain level in life, you need to give back. And that does everything for you and helps you to lead with love. How's that? Did I tie that back a little bit? Okay. Whether you're on a board, whether you're doing nonprofit work, and this actually goes to something that he knows about my life, and that goes to you, young lady, also. I was privileged to, when I was in med school, travel to Africa and work there. When I was in residency, travel to Africa and work there. And now I'm the medical director of a nonprofit, and I go to Africa every year and we do a mission over there. And this is time donation. This is my 2 weeks of vacation from my work. That's how I spend it. But for me, the best way for me to give everything I have to my, it's 7:30 to 4, but my 9 to 5 is to give back on things in my life, whether it's, so that Africa project, I'm also in charge of a sexual assault team. So whether it's helping women after sexual assault or domestic violence, whether it's working with Africa, once I do those things, now I have the rest of me. I can do my regular stuff. And that's how I lead.
I know I said understanding before, and still believe in that? No, you're fine. One thing that we sometimes forget is that as we're working, sometimes things get obstacles, all these obstacles, especially the higher up you go. And in order to be an effective leader to your team while you're having your own frustrations that you're dealing with is perseverance. Make sure you're more resilient than you are, and you will persevere and you will continue to push through. And that's the one thing that leaders, at least good leaders are resilient, they persevere, and they're very understanding in my aspect, including what Wendy and Anita just provided. But yeah.
I want to say be contagious. Like, good leaders that lead with love are contagious. Like, they can take that grumpy person who always says no and like turn them around sometimes. But they can do it. Like, just like be contagious. Like, be in it and don't let that person's mood get in your way, or change your style or your goals or your mission, or what you believe. Like, just be contagious.
I would say empower. When I think of a good leader who leads with love, it's someone who empowers you to be great. It's someone that recognizes that no leader is the smartest person. I don't want to be the smartest person. I have over 20 on my team. Every time I look to hire someone, I want them to be smarter than me. I want them to be brilliant. I want them to bring qualities that I don't have, and I want to empower them so that they can feel comfortable being smarter than me, being just everything that they can truly be. So empowerment.
Can you give a round of applause?